So recently in biblical studies, we've been learning about David, who was the second king of Israel. When he was young, he served as a shepherd in his father's house, but after Saul was rejected by God, Samuel went to Ramah and pretended to offer an offering, but he actually went to Jesse's house, and the Lord told him to anoint one of his sons. There were 7 sons, but the Lord said it was none of them. So Samuel asked Jesse if he had any more sons. Jesse said that he had one more son, David, who was out in the field tending the sheep. So Samuel told Jesse to call David in, and after David came in, Samuel anointed him as next king of Israel. But David still went back to tending his flock. Later, when the Israelites were having a battle against Goliath, against the Philistines, the giant Goliath came and challenged one of the Israelites to a 1v1 combat. And if they won, and if the Israelites won, the Philistines would be their slaves. But if the Philistines won, the Israelites would be their slaves. So David was going to the battlefield at that time to provide things for his brothers. But when he heard the Philistine taunting Israel, he was very upset, and he challenged Goliath to fight with him. He used only a sling and a staff and 5 smooth rocks he gathered from the stream to kill Goliath, and the Philistines scattered. So the Israelites were pleased, but Saul was jealous at him because when David went back to the city, the women were praising him over Saul. They said, Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. So Saul tried to hunt David. At first, David went to the palace to relieve Saul because Saul was sometimes attacked by demons, but multiple times Saul tried to kill David. Eventually, he openly opposed David, who had also developed a bromance for Saul's son, Jonathan. So they were very, very close friends. But later they had to part because Saul was trying to hunt down David. So later David was in the desert for a long time, and he fled to like other countries like the Philistines land, and also like the Ammonites land, I think. And just to try to escape Saul. He encountered Saul 2 times, but both of the times he didn't try to kill Saul, and so Saul went back. But both times he tried to get back to David. So later David.
记得那2次是哪2次吗？
So the first time was when Saul went into a cave to relieve himself, and David cut off the hem of his robe, but later he felt guilty and returned it to Saul to prove that he could have killed him but did not. The second time was when Saul and all his men were sleeping. David and his nephew went like right next to the king and stole his jar and his spear, just to prove that he also could have killed Saul at that time, but he did not. So later, Saul and his son Jonathan were killed in combat against the Philistines, and David was very sad for them, and he wrote songs about their death and their lives. So later, David became the king of Judah, but after a few years or a few months, I think.
他不仅成为犹大，还成为另外一个支派，除了犹大支派。
Judah and I think Benjamin.
对，
maybe.
便雅悯支派
Yeah.
Yes.
But after some time, Israel wanted him as all of their kings. So David became one of the kings of Israel. He was a very great king, and he tried to obey the Lord as he could. But he also committed adultery with Bathsheba, who was Uriah's wife. And he also murdered Uriah by sending him to the front lines without any cover. So because of this, God cursed their child to die, and he also And he also cursed David's family to always have perpetual like conflict and murder. So, but David also wanted to build like a temple for God. God didn't allow him because he was a warrior and had killed a lot of people. So David drew the diagrams and like gave it to Solomon, his eldest son. So he had many sons, but Absalom, one of his favorite sons, I think, tried to murder one of his own brothers and murdered him for having sex with Absalom's sister by birth. So after committing murder, Absalom fled, but he was eventually killed by David's general. And I can't remember their names because all their names are so confusing.
像是亚撒黑，not 亚撒黑，我也不记得了，那个叫什么名字啊？他的那个护卫长叫什么名字
？Yeah,
什么鸭我不记得了。Okay.
So, anyways, David's family was cursed, and later his kingdom would only reduce to a sixth of the original Israel. But God kept his promise to David to favor him, and later Jesus was descended from David.
他的一个儿子，你刚刚说了亚沙龙，还有他的另外一个儿子，想抢在，就是所罗门之前做王，记不记得那个叫什么名字？
也是鸭是吗？
叫什么？
不记得。
哎呀，我也一下子不记得了，待会儿可以去查一下。
但是
当时的那个记不记得当时是
like back then his other brother tried to proclaim himself as king, but Nathan the prophet and Bathsheba went to David and told him. So David took his mule and everything and put Solomon on his mule and proclaimed that Solomon was going to be the king. So that everybody at his brother's self-proclaimed party had scattered, and a few of them, and the general went to the altar and held there and refused to go away, so he was killed there. And later Solomon became king. So when David died, he died naturally, not from any sickness or battle.
但是因为他和拔示巴犯罪以后，那个拿单不是来说，他说神说刀剑必不离开你的家，是不是刀剑必不离开你的家？
His whole family was always battling against themselves, actually.
对，然后亚沙龙不是想杀掉大卫的时候，大卫他留下了他一些嫔妃，你还记得那个
He raped them on the roof.
对啊，他在暗中就是去和拔示巴行这件事情，后来神就让他，他就说让他的让他自己的嫔妃就好像在光天化日之下就被他自己的儿子强奸了，凌辱了，我觉得真是好，so sad。